Hey, this is C&D channel. I'm Chris. This is MMA for you. I'm going to be doing my predictions for UFC Fight Night 50, Souza or Jacare versus Mousasi 2, which happens on September 5th. Same day as the Bellator season opener, I guess. That has Pat Curran versus Patricio Pitbull 2 on it. Overall, this card, really strong card. This main card, honestly, I wish some of these fights were on UFC 177. I mean, they didn't need this many. If they just had Jacare versus Mousasi and Overeem versus Rothwell and a decent card underneath that, it'd be understandable. But they actually have some decent, some pretty strong fights here. Moraga versus Scoggins, I believe they're both two top 10. I think Scoggins is top 10. If not, I know it's like top 15 flyweights. Oliveira versus Lentz, good rematch. Oliveira is one of the hot prospects at 145. Derrick Lewis versus Matt Mitrione, or Matt Mitrione. Good heavyweight fight. It could be a gas fest or it could be a knockout. And even Chiesa versus Lauzon could be a really fun ground battle as well. The undercard, the prelims, I mean, you do have some prospects here. Skelly versus Soriano. That's really good and really hard to call, actually. I'm actually pretty high on Soriano. I was actually going to pick him against his regular opponent. Skelly would be pretty tough there. Chris Beal's fighting. He's undefeated. Not a bad prospect by any means. Iaquinta, the most hot and cold prospect out there. I mean, the guy will beat pretty good prospects like Piotr Hallman and Kevin Lee, and then lose his last fight by getting choked out. It's against a guy that, quite on Mitch Clark. Oh, it's Mitch Clark, yeah. It's like, how do you beat those guys and then lose to Mitch Clark? You know what I mean? So it's just one of those things with Iaquinta there. But yeah, let's just get started. Okay, in the main event, we have Gegard Mousasi versus Ronaldo Jacare Souza. Okay, this is a rematch from their Dream fight, or is it Pride? Well, I think it's Dream. It ended with one of the best up kick knockouts of all time. Souza was kind of charging in. Mousasi throws an up kick, knocks Jacare out cold. So with Mousasi, he has a 35-4 record with 2 draws, 18 wins by KO or TKO, 12 wins by sub. He also has 2 losses by submission. 29 years old. He's the former Strikeforce light heavyweight champion. He's actually, he does a lot of kickboxing tournaments, but actually his strength is in his boxing. He has strong boxing. He uses a jab really well. He has a really good chin. I don't think this guy can get wobbled, no less dropped. I've never seen it. He has strong Brazilian jiu-jitsu skills, and he's good off his back. His weakness would have to be takedown defense. It's weak, but it is improving. You got to see huge improvements in his takedown defense against Mark Munoz. Something of an asterisk there, though, because Mark Munoz was shooting from, a couple feet away. So it was much easier to defend his takedowns. But nonetheless, Mousasi showed some really strong takedown defense against Munoz. Jacare, 20-3 record with 1 no contest, 2 wins by KO or TKO, and 14 wins by sub. He also has 2 losses by KO or TKO. He's on a 6-fight win streak. He's 34 years old, training out of X-Gym. He's a former Strikeforce middleweight champion. He's one of the top Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioners in the world. Very strong guard passer, for one thing. His offensive takedown ability is really good. He can time takedowns pretty well, like he did against Carmon. He can also do a lot of good takedowns when he has an opponent up against a cage. His stand-up is improving, and he has some remarkably heavy hands. for a guy that started out as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. Man, this fight is so hard for me to call because Souza is capable of exploiting Mousasi's takedown defense. That's the thing. And while Jacare's stand-up is improving, Mousasi is the better striker here. Easily the better striker here. So, I mean, really we don't need... If I were to pick Jacare, it'd be because I think he can take Mousasi down. It'd be a 5-round fight. It'd be because I think he'd be able to take Mousasi down. But I don't think he'd be able to finish him even if he takes him down. Might be able to just win on points. Mousasi, though, he can win in the stand-up and possibly get the KO or TKO on Jacare. So, this is pretty tough to call. It's really hard to call. I'm leaning towards Jacare. I think he's improved his stand-up enough where at least it's not a liability in a fight against Mousasi. He might just throw like the overhand right, duck under for like the takedown, especially against him if he gets him up against a cage. I can kind of see that happening a couple amount of times. And that's the other thing too. I can kind of see Souza being able to get Mousasi up against a cage. Not super confident in it though because man, Mousasi could potentially just box him up from the outside. Kicks, throws a couple kicks to keep him honest as well. Use a jab, just keep him at range the whole time, and get the win there. So it's really hard for me to call. And like I said, even if Jacare takes Mousasi down, it's not an instant sub. Heck, I don't even know if he can pass that dominant position. Probably could do that much, but you know, Mousasi is really tricky on the ground himself. But you know, like I said, I think that's Jacare will be able to get those takedowns and be able to take the fight to the ground at least and win at least 3 rounds here. Close fight. Ronaldo, Jacare, Souza for the win here. Next fight after that, Alistair Overeem fights Ben Rothwell. Well, Ben Rothwell has a 33-9 record, 19 wins by KO or TKO, 11 wins by sub. He also has 4 losses by KO or TKO and 2 losses by sub. He's 32 years old. Relatively tall for the weight class. He's 6'4", whereas Alistair Overeem 6'5". Right now, Ben Rothwell is trading wins and losses. He actually beat Brandon Vera in his last fight, but then got suspended for elevated testosterone. And that suspension means that he last fought in August 2013. So he does have a layoff going on here. He's a veteran. Stand-up's good. You know, he's heavy-handed and his cardio is pretty weak. His ground game, I mean, his game off his back isn't anything to write home about either. Alistair Overeem, 37-13 record with 1 no contest. 15 wins by KO or TKO, 19 wins by sub. He also has 8 losses by KO or TKO and 2 losses by sub. He's 34 years old. Like I said, he's 6'5". Right now he's training out of Jackson Winklejohn. If you've seen a lot of pictures of him, he definitely looks a lot skinnier these days. Yeah, he's a former Strikeforce heavyweight champion. He's got some strong kickboxing and some great kickboxing accolades. His knees are devastating. They're some of the best in the UFC. He does have heavy hands and an underrated grappling ability. His wrestling actually isn't too bad. His offensive takedown ability, not too bad. Took down guys like Bigfoot pretty easily. Kind of ragdolls him sometimes. And a couple other opponents, now that I think about it. His cardio, though, is not very good. So, the upset can happen. Okay, I'm assuming that Ben Rothwell is the underdog here. I think that's going to be pretty obvious enough. And Ben Rothwell, they're heavyweights. He's a heavy-handed guy. He's got a good chin himself. If he touches Overeem, it could spell trouble. One thing that Overeem can do if the stand-up doesn't work out for him is that he can take the fight to the ground like what he did against Frank Mir. Knowing that he's training with Jackson and Winklejohn, it wouldn't actually surprise me if he goes with a more conservative, grappling-oriented strategy in this fight. So with that said, I think Overeem's is better in the stand-up anyways, but he can get caught for sure. And I think he's a better grappler. So overall, he's just a better overall fighter, I think. But you gotta watch out, because if his chin gets touched, it could be all over for Overeem. But nonetheless, I think that Overeem is gonna win this one. Next fight after that, Mitrione fights Derrick Lewis. Well, Mitrione has a 7-3 record, 6 wins by KO TKO, 1 win by decision. He's 36 years old, 6'3". They're both actually 6'3". Trains out of the Black Zillions. He's a good kickboxer, heavy-handed guy. He can knock people out, and his kicks are really improving. Mitrione, though, does not have good takedown defense. Derrick Lewis, 11-2 record with 1 no contest, 10 wins by KO TKO, 1 win by sub. He's 29 years old. He's on a 5-fight win streak. And this guy has some ridiculous power. I mean, he's got heavy hands, 1-punch knockout power, 2 wins by ground and pound against Jack May in the UFC. Beat Jack May with ground and pound, and then he beat Guto Innocente. I mean, dude, he looked huge compared to Guto Innocente. Knocked out Jared Rosholt also. I remember he was getting out-wrestled a lot of times in their fight. Hung in there and managed to get the knockout nonetheless. So he's a real resilient guy as well. Love his post-fight interviews too. It's just kind of, I don't know, just kind of funny. I mean, he called him Matt Mitrione. It's a funny guy. I'm going with Derrick Lewis. Younger, heavy-handed, kind of up-and-coming. They're both strikers, so anything can happen. I think Matt Mitrione has a better technique. I think Lewis is probably the more steadily improving fighter, though, I would say. He's only 29. Mitrione actually has really made some strides for a guy that's started MMA in his 30s, Doesn't have that many fights. He only has 10 fights, and he's made some huge strides. I mean, he's a UFC caliber guy. He's not a top level fighter, but he's a good mid-level heavyweight. Like, he's very solid, so he could definitely win this one. But and his technique, especially under the Black Zillions, and his stand-up has just been improving. But I still gotta go with Lewis. I think he's steadily improving as well, and he's just got some stupid power. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous with him. I mean, some guys just have it. I mean, Mitrione, it hits hard as well, but Lewis is just a guy. I mean, when he ground and pounds a guy, it's done. The fight's done. It's he has a guy on the ground and pound. Oh, it's done. That's the thing with Derrick Lewis. Derrick Lewis for the win there. Okay, next fight after that, Michael Chiesa fights Joe Lauzon. Well, Chiesa has an 11-1 record, 8 wins by sub, 3 wins by decision, 29 years old, on a 2-fight win streak, training out of Sick Jitsu with the likes of Sam Cecilia and Juliana Pena. He has good wrestling, especially completing takedowns against the cage. He's really good at that. And his strength is in his back control, and of course, he has a really good mount, as shown in the Francisco Trinaldo fight. But once he takes the back, his opponent is usually in a lot of trouble. It's hard to get Chiesa off your back, and he can usually find a rear naked choke there. He's really good there, and he overall just has some really strong Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skills. Joe Lauzon, 23-9 record, 4 wins by KO or TKO, 18 wins by sub. He also has 3 losses by KO or TKO and 3 losses by sub. He's 30 years old. He's got some average stand-up, some really aggressive Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's not a natural wrestler, but he's really aggressive about getting to takedowns, aggressive about guard passing, and aggressive about getting to submission, especially when he's in a dominant position. One thing about him, though, is he actually, for a lightweight, he actually does not have good cardio. He's a guy that has shown to fade around the end of the second and especially in the third round. In a lot of his fights, he just tends to fade. Chiesa has not shown that problem. I think he can definitely hang with Lauzon on the ground, possibly even take Lauzon's back. Be an interesting ground battle because Lauzon definitely is the more reckless guy, whereas Chiesa, I feel, is a little more technically sound on the ground. Not to say that Lauzon isn't technically sound. He can just get really aggressive with his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, he, against like Mac Danzig, he like spins for the armbar from mount, loses mount because he's just so. But it's that type of. He's kind of reckless about it. You know what I mean? And he can lose, and has shown to lose position because of that recklessness on the ground. But on the other end of the spectrum, he's actually won fights because he's just so over, like, he has so much pressure on the ground and whatnot that a lot of fighters can't handle that type of ground pressure. So it's a close fight, but I'm gonna go with Chiesa. I think he's a better wrestler for one thing, and like I said, I think he can hang on the ground. And Lauzon, man, that guy's been in some wars, man, and Chiesa, not so much. Next fight after that, Nick Lentz fights Charles Oliveira. Oliveira has an 18-4 record with 1 no contest, 6 wins by KO or TKO, 11 wins by sub. He also has 2 losses by KO or TKO. He's 24 years old on a 2-fight win streak. Most recently, submitting Hatsuyuki with like a variation Peruvian necktie Bravo choke. It was pretty awesome. He didn't just hang on the ground with Hatsuyuki. He managed to submit him. That's huge. Trains out of Macaco Gold team with the likes of Jorge Patino. Strong Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skills. Strong off his back. He's got some strong offensive Muay Thai. The biggest problem with Charles Oliveira is a stand-up defense is pretty weak. Nick Lentz, 25-6 record with 2 draws and 1 no contest. 6 wins by KO or TKO, 10 wins by sub. He also has 2 losses by KO or TKO. 30 years old, training out of ATT. He is a grinder. This guy will grab onto you, maybe take the back, and just grind away. He has really good suffocating top control. His wrestling's good, and his stand-up is improving. The thing is, though, stylistically, Lentz's style generally doesn't work against a guy like Oliveira. He's a good scrambler on the ground. He's very positionally aware. If he's on his back, like against Hatsuyuki, if you watch Oliveira, when he was on his back, he can get back up to his feet, like almost any time. It's almost like he knew it, too. The other thing is Lentz has to watch out for the sweeps and subs from his back. On the stand-up, I think Oliveira beats him there. They fought before. Oliveira kneed him when he was grounded. But Oliveira's winning the fight up until that point. I gotta go Charles Oliveira to win this one. I think he has superior stand-up, and if the fight hits the ground, you're actually, just as much as you're going into Lentz's world by going into the ground, you're also going into Charles Oliveira's world as well. Okay, and the final fight of the main card, we have Justin Scoggins versus John Moraga. Okay, Scoggins, 9-1 record, 6 wins by KO or TKO, 1 win by sub, 22 years old, training out of ATT. Really well-rounded fighter. He has his karate-style stand-up. He's a good wrestler, too. A pretty strong wrestler, actually. His Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skills are actually solid as well. This is a guy, when he fought Dustin Ortiz, he should have held on to that armbar longer, but, he can find, like, stuff off his back and whatnot. He's a good scrambler as well. I honestly had Justin Scoggins beating Dustin Ortiz in the last fight. It was close though, but I personally thought that Scoggins should have got the win there. Well, Moraga, 14-3 record, 2 wins by KO TKO, 6 wins by sub. He's 30 years old. Trains out of MMA Lab with the likes of Alex Caceres and Benson Henderson. He's a good wrestler himself. He does have a tendency to still get taken down regardless. His stand-up is solid. But I gotta go Scoggins. I am super high on Justin Scoggins. I think he's a blue chip prospect. He's ready for the top 10 now, and Moraga believes in the top 10 anyways. I think he might even beat him and beat Moraga in pretty much all areas of MMA. I think he might be the better wrestler. I think he might have the better stand-up here, better cardio even. So yeah, I'll go with Justin Scoggins for the win there. Okay, on to the prelims, which will actually also be on Fox Sports 1, as we have Rodrigo Damm versus Iaquinta. Well, Damm has a 12-7 record, 2 wins by KO TKO, 6 wins by sub. He also has 3 losses by KO TKO. He's 34 years old, and he's a legit Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Striking, I mean, it's average. It can be a bit wild at times. Iaquinta, 8-3 record with 1 draw, 3 wins by KO TKO, 1 win by sub. All 3 of his losses are by submission. 1 to Michael Chiesa, 1 to Mitch Clark, and who else? I forgot who else he lost to at the moment. But he's 27 years old. Considering how many times that all of his losses are by submission, it's very curious that he trains at Soriano, because a lot of guys out of Soriano have really good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skills. He's a good boxer though. His takedown defense is solid. His offensive wrestling isn't too bad. It's just his submission defense that needs work. I think Iaquinta takes this one. You know, I think he can box Damm on the feet. I think he's fought and beaten guys better than Rodrigo Damm, to be perfectly honest with you. I think he can defend any takedowns that Rodrigo Damm would employ. So Iaquinta for the win there. Okay, next fight is that. Chris Camozzi fights Rafael Natal. Okay, Chris Camozzi, 19-8 record, 5 wins by KO TKO, 6 wins by sub. He also has 4 losses by submission, 27 years old. And he's big for the weight class. He's also like 6'3" and just like really big for the weight class. Whereas Rafael Natal is like 6 foot. Camozzi's on a 3-fight losing streak. Who did he lose to? It's like, I want to say it's like Jacare, Larkin, Bruno Santos, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he's decent everywhere. His Muay Thai's decent. His Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu's not bad. His wrestling's not too bad. Good everywhere. Not great at any one aspect of MMA. That's the thing with Camozzi. Rafael Natal, 17-6 record with 1 draw, 3 wins by KO TKO, 8 wins by sub. He also has 4 losses by KO TKO. He's 31 years old. He's on a 2-fight losing streak. Was recently losing to Ed Herman. And I want to say before that was the Tim Kennedy loss, if I'm not mistaken. He trains out of Renzo Gracie's. Natal's a legit Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Stand-up's average. He's actually shown some pretty heavy-handedness though. And he has some weak cardio. I think Rafael Natal is pretty much better in most areas of MMA than Chris Camozzi. The problem is, mentally, he's not stronger than Chris Camozzi. Camozzi's very game. He's got a good chin. He'll keep pushing forward. It's always really hard to pick a Rafael Natal fight because he has all the tools to beat certain guys, but he finds ways to lose. Like, quite honestly, I thought he can beat Ed Herman, but he was going for ill-advised takedowns, sapping, getting his injury sapped and whatnot. So it's tough to say. It's tough to trust Rafael Natal. with that said, I'm actually kind of leaning towards Camozzi now that I said it. I'm going to go with Natal. I think if he hits the ground especially, should be able to out jiu-jitsu Chris Camozzi. On the stand-up, I'd give the edge to Camozzi barely. I'd give the power edge to Natal though. But yeah, I'll go with Rafael Natal to win this one. Not super confident in that pick though. Okay, next fight after that, Chris Beal fights Tateki Matsuda. Well, Matsuda has a 10-5 record, 4 wins by KO or TKO, 1 win by sub, 28 years old on a 2-fight win streak. Trains out of Team Sityatong. That team's actually kind of coming back into prominence now. You got a really good fighter in Rob Font now in there. Rico Desculo from Bellator fights out of there. So, definitely coming back into prominence. It'll be his first fight in the UFC, and he's taking this fight on short notice. I remember he tried out for the Ultimate Fighter, and he lost. I forgot how, though. Well, Chris Beal has a 9-0 undefeated record, 3 wins by KO or TKO, 6 wins by decision, 29 years old. He's a good boxer, but he's adding more to the skill set. Most recently beating Patrick Williams by a highlight reel style flying knee. It's pretty impressive, Chris Beal, and I think he's actually a decent prospect. I don't think he's like a blue chip prospect per se. Decent enough prospect. I think he gets a win here. And finally, Skelly fights Sean Soriano. Well, Skelly has a 12-1 record, 2 wins by KO or TKO, 7 wins by sub, 29 years old, training at a Team Takedown with the likes of the Rochelt brothers and Johnny Hendricks. He's taking the fight on short notice, having already fought on August 23rd, 2014, where he got the win over Tom Inimaki. He's a good wrestler, always pushing forward, very high pressure. Got some good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skills. Stand-ups, not the greatest. He actually has some pretty awkward footwork. Sean Soriano, 8-1 record, 3 wins by KO or TKO, 3 wins by sub, 24 years old, training on the Black Zones. Had a really good showing actually against Kawajiri. Defended a good amount of his takedowns. I've seen Soriano's stuff. He's a good wrestler, and his stand-up's actually pretty solid. He's a very solid prospect. So this fight's kind of hard for me to call because, you know, Skelly's a wrestler. Soriano's got some good wrestling as well. I'd actually give the edge to stand up, probably to Soriano. But I'm going to go with Skelly here. I think he's going to be... Soriano's a good wrestler. I think Skelly's just a better wrestler, to be honest with you. And he might be a little better on the ground. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Skelly for the win there. Okay, to recap on the main card of Ronaldo Jacare Souza over Gegard Mousasi, Alistair Overeem beating Ben Rothwell, Derrick Lewis over Matt Mitrione, Michael Chiesa over Joe Lauzon, Charles Oliveira beating Nick Lentz, and Justin Scoggins beating John Moraga. On the prelims, I got Iaquinta over Rodrigo Damm, Rafael Natal over Chris Camozzi, Chris Beal beating Tateki Matsuda, and Skelly over Sean Soriano. So that's it for my predictions for UFC Fight Night 50. If you have any comments, just leave them below. And that's it for MMA for you. Thank you guys very much.